views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hi everyone, welcome to Mission BX. Mission BX is a collaboration between BronxNet and the Center for Bronx Nonprofits at Hostos Community College. Today we're going to be visiting with Lisa Sorin, who is the Executive Director of the Bronx Chamber of Commerce, and Michael Brady, who is the Executive Director of the Third Avenue BID. I'm sure you're going to find them entertaining and really interesting. Hi, welcome to Mission BX. And today we're here with two of the most enthusiastic and passionate people I know involved in the Bronx. So Michael Brady, who is the Executive Director of the Third Avenue BID, and Lisa Sorin, who is the Executive Director of the Bronx Chamber. So thank you. Thank you for the time.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much.
One of my questions is, A, how did you both get involved in this? I mean, it seems to me that this is not the kind of job that you think, boy, when I grow up, I want to run a BID. Or I think I'll just run a Chamber of Commerce organization. So let's, either one of you. Lisa, let's start with you.
Well, by accident, right? As you change careers over the course of the years and you get to meet people, and then you see people who think that they see something in you that you don't realize you have. So I've always been about community and volunteering, and through that came my work with small business and community boards, and that kind of like triggered into just what can I do for the community on a bigger scale. So my jobs in the past have always included some level of community association or work. And about 8 years ago, I got introduced to what was a business improvement district, which I never knew what it was. I have no idea, and probably most people don't know what those are. And then I had the pleasure of meeting this fabulous guy sitting next to me, and it sort of kind of took off. And the Chamber is just a bigger version of the excellent work done by executive directors at the BID. So it's kind of like a really easy transition.
So, and were you always in the Bronx?
Always in the Bronx. Always in the Bronx, which I absolutely love.
That's
so
why we're friends.
That's exactly why we're friends.
That's why you're on the show.
That's right.
So, and that's a great segue, Michael, for what did you do before? And then also the whole question of, for people who don't know, what is a BID?
Right. And
We know that the Chamber is a bigger version, but...
Yeah. Absolutely. So a little bit of background. Prior to heading up the Third Avenue BID and now Southern Boulevard BID, because we're doing a regional approach to the South Bronx business development, I was a master planner for the Bronx waterfront. And when that was completed, the logical step for me was, okay, well, we've developed or we've put into motion plans for the Bronx waterfront on Harlem River, East River. It's really time to focus on our commercial districts and to make sure that people are spending their money in the borough, as opposed to going to Harlem's 125th Street or downtown or to Bay Plaza Mall or things of that sort. Like, how do we keep those dollars in our streets and really enable our small business owners to buy back their block? So that's what turned me on to it. And you know, business improvement districts are a really interesting animal. We're nonprofit organizations. We're quasi-governmental, not in that we are a government agency, but that we work very closely with city agencies. And we're really charged with maintaining robust commercial districts. So anything from filling vacancies, advocating for small businesses through appropriate policy on the city, state, and federal level, to your bread and butter issues like sanitation, security services, beautification measures, branding, marketing. Third Avenue is the only BID in New York City that has a public health department because the opioid crisis impacts our district so much. So BIDs are a different animal. And I think a lot of folks who know the word bid or know business improvement districts say, oh, well, I know what they do, but they really don't know the structure. They don't know that they're a separate entity that's actually funded by the property owners, not by everybody's taxes, just by a select number of property owners in a district who elect to have an extra assessment put on them to supply these services. And bids were really formed out of New York City's financial crisis in the 70s with the founding of the Union Square bid when New York City was broke. And private property owners said, oh, well, we need sanitation. We would like holiday lights. We need marketing. We need security, because the city just isn't providing that anymore. And now we've grown the bid network to 76 bids throughout New York. New York City pumping something like $220 million into the city's economy. And we really closely collaborate with the chamber because there's a ton of intersectionality, particularly when it comes to policy and small business issues.
Right.
So how does a bid get, the other day I was at a meeting and somebody was talking about a certain area, and somebody said, oh, and then we could turn it into a bid. And I thought, you just wake up one morning and say, here's the magic wand? How does that happen? How does it become a bid?
I think it starts from the fact of realizing that there's a problem, right? At the end of the day,
Who has to realize that?
it comes from property owners and it comes from the merchants. And not everybody understands it or sees it. It's not a one-size-fits-all, right? And it's not for every community. Every single corridor is unique unto itself. Third Avenue has always had the foot traffic and the stores, and even at a time where some of the stores started coming into Third Avenue, people were like, really? But there was a need there, right? You have, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of people walking through Third Avenue, and then you have smaller bids who have no foot traffic, who have a reputation of high vacancies. And property owners are saying, if we don't invest, we'll never get the tenants in. And if the tenants aren't successful, we'll always be losing money, right? And then merchant associations are amazing, but they're a volunteer organization. So bids are a permanent, lifelong entity that after all the people who are passionate about volunteering their time, then you go into saying, wait a minute, we want this to be long-term. Even after we're gone, although I can't imagine them being without us, but
I'm be around for another 100 years.
yeah, at least. And so the need, and it's a long process. On average, 2 to 5 years minimum.
2 to 5 years
To get it going.
To get it going.
Because
So
it
how
takes-
long have you been there, Michael?
So I've been at Third Avenue for, I'm going into my 4th year now.
Okay, 'cause I knew-
But Third Avenue's been around for 32 years or so. It's the oldest bid in the Bronx, and we have about 350,000 people a day in the district. It's a high transit area. I mean, I like to say it's the equivalent of Times Square without the resources and double the challenges.
That's a good
But
definition.
it's a really good way of describing it. But the process to get a business improvement district started is a 2-year public engagement phase where you're speaking with stakeholders, you're meeting with elected officials, you're meeting with small business owners, and then you send an enormous package with statements of support and things like that to the New York City Department of Small Business Services, and that kicks off the legislative period, which takes roughly a year to be enacted, and it takes another year for that bid to actually get a budget. So the whole process is about 3 to 5 years.
And how many are in the Bronx?
Oh, well, we're up to 12 now, which is really exciting. We're on par with Queens. I'm all about competition. We're
Poor Tom.
yeah. So we're up to 12 because I think what makes the Bronx somewhat unique is we're not a high density area. We have a lot of pockets of commercial corridors. Then you have the big malls coming in. Malls come and go. The small corridors are long-term, right? They're generational. I know that the bid where I was with Westchester Square, it was second and third generations of people owning the same business, the building, the property, right? And so they don't want to lose that, but with the changing of times, the changing of, the internet and all these different things, it takes a bid and the collaboration. So I think the one thing, and Mike is being really not, being very humble about, is the fact that when you get powerhouses as executive directors, right, they see the bigger picture, because it's easy to go in and run a bid and just stay within your boundaries. And the boundaries can be 3 blocks, like they be, 100 blocks, right? So bids come in all shapes and sizes. But at the end of the day, I think that if there isn't that collaboration of understanding on the bigger, it goes back to what Mike was saying, as a borough, right? We don't want to pocket ourselves. We want to be able to say the success at Third Avenue works for the success of Westchester Square, works, and if there's issue, you work off each other, and then the chamber is sort of this umbrella to say, how can we help, and let's tie all this together.
So that's a good segue for it. We have to take a break, but then we're going to come back, and then I want to talk about how you two work together.
Sure.
You sure you want to know?
Well,
Okay. How much time do you have?
We built a media network for you.
BronxNet TV.
Come learn in your new state-of-the-art studios at Lehman College.
At Mercy College.
And coming soon to the South Bronx in the Hub.
Inspire with your stories, culture, history.
Your Bronx on BronxNet.
Engage with us.
Connect with us at your channels and at BronxNet.tv.
Learn, engage, inspire. BronxNet TV.
From the Bronx
To the world.
BronxNet.
Welcome back. And again, we're here with Michael Brady from the Third Avenue Bid and Lisa Sorin from the Bronx Chamber of Commerce. So now we want to talk about how you two actually work together. So we know about bids now, and we know what they are, and we know that how the chamber is kind of an extension. So how do you, obviously you have a great relationship, and that makes it easier, but how is it that you work together? What do you do?
Tequila.
Other than that.
I think that it's incumbent upon business improvement districts to really make sure, as we were saying before, that we have this regionalized strength. And each district represents a different node of the Bronx, but the chamber represents the entire Bronx. So when we speak for small businesses, I can speak for the 250 businesses on Third Avenue or the 150 on Southern Boulevard, but when the Bronx Chamber speaks, we're speaking for thousands of businesses. And I think that having that unified voice is really important, particularly in matters of equity and policy. For so long, I think the Bronx has kind of been scuttlebutted a bit when it came to small business development, but I have to say, Lisa's been in the position now for 8 months.
8 months.
8 months or so.
Wow.
And the amount of energy that she's brought to the table with getting elected officials to know that the small business community is here, and we're employers of over 100,000 people, and that we have an economic development impact on the borough, and that we're really a voice that needs to be heard, and that policies really should be going through small businesses, particularly as it pertains to economic development policy. And I am very lucky to be on the board of the chamber, and the co-chair of the legislative committee, but I just think that there's such commonality and synergy that exists between business improvement districts and the chamber that can maximize the growth and development of the borough.
And what he's saying. But
But give me an example of something that occurs and you say,
The
hey,
lien
we
law.
have to.
yeah, I think so. For the chamber's perspective, so I was blessed to go into the business improvement district world, and it was a huge learning curve of just focusing on a little area. And my genuine way of thinking is always, you can't do things alone. And so you're not an expert. So you bring the right people to the table and you have these conversations. And during my time at the bid and Mike came on board, it was like, what can we do collectively? The Bronx is on an upward movement, strong. We should benefit from it as the Bronx, right? Why should other people come from the outside when the Bronx has been struggling, good, bad, and indifferent? And so you have these powerful people leading these amazing institutions. So coming to the chamber, it was like, let's use that power of voices. And so I think the one thing in my last 8 months is the amount of legislative issues, both at the state and at the city, that are just blowing our businesses out of the water. And only those who are on the ground can assist. So having Michael co-chair the legislative committee and having the right people on the board brings a voice of knowledge and engagement, right? And so the chamber can yell and scream and bring, my job I think is more about educating. So, and Michael is well versed in a lot of legislative and bill writing and things, right? I'm not. I just know what my businesses need to stay strong and what the borough needs, right? Because to me it's about the Bronx benefiting the Bronx. And so I think that legislatively, the lien bill is a state bill that has hit the table, and it's going to the governor's office.
What, and could you give us
So-
the ones,
Sure.
the elevator pitch?
So,
about-
so the lien bill, in short, is a bill that was passed in the Assembly and the Senate of New York State that essentially says that if an employee has an issue with wages, perhaps they question if an employer shorted them on wages or shorted them on hours, they have the right to bring a claim against the employer, which I have no issue with. If an employer owes you money and they're trying to shirk you on money, that's fine. But then that automatically triggers, without due process, a lien on that employer personally and through their business. So there are a lot of hurdles with that bill. I think in concept it's really well intentioned, but the unintended consequences being that it could be a disgruntled employee. It could be an employee who showed, maybe their schedule was working 9 to 5, but they showed up at 8. And all of those things that tend to be out of the control of the small business owner, but yet the small business owner is the one that's being penalized without due process.
So do small business owners contact you about issues that they're having? Are you a go-to, either of you?
Yeah.
I mean, for me, if you're a nonprofit, somebody will tell you, call the Center for Bronx Nonprofits.
Right.
So
Right.
do you have that kind of?
I do. I think Michael more than the chamber. You know, for me, it's looking at the bigger picture, right? So Michael will get the direct conversation of his merchants, his property owners, and so there's 12 bids, there's tons of merchant associations, and then we have all our members, both corporate and small. And so conversations happen. And my thing is saying, okay, what's happening that's impacting our business? Perfect example, this big fight on the vacation bill that the city of New York is trying to force on our businesses, right? I think,
So explain.
so the vacation bill is City Hall's push to mandate all businesses to provide 10 days of vacation to their employees. Now, we are not opposed to treating employees well, right? I think you and I have had major discussions, everything from the minimum wage. It's all about, you know, you treat your employee well, they're gonna stay. So, but in every industry, there's bad apples. It's just a given. And so the government telling private industry, listen, you have to give your employees no matter what 10 days, and is ridiculous unless you're going to show us how you're going to pay for it.
And that 10-day equivalent is really the equivalent of 20 days, because not only am I giving that employee 10 days off, but then I have to pay somebody else to come in and do their work while they're gone.
That kind of
That's
situation.
correct. And then that translates into more payroll taxes, that translate into more, you know, workers' comp and all the insurances that go with it. So we're not saying let's not, but let's have a conversation. And I think the city at this point is using small business as their own personal piggy bank. And I have a problem with that on the bigger picture, right? And this comes to my attention. I have experts like Mike and some of my other amazing board of directors who are saying, this is happening, and how do we put a stop to it? How do we make our voices heard? And I'll be honest with you, I think that the mission of the chamber over the course of the last 6 to 7 months is, yeah, we network and we have a good time and we put business to business together, and that's my job. And it's not even a job, I love it. I love the fact that we can do Bronx business to Bronx business, keep it local, let's keep the revenues where it belongs. So I love that whole part, but if we don't have businesses to run, then what's the point? I mean,
Right, and you know, it's not that we're anti-employee when it comes to the
Right.
paid vacation bill. It's just the cost is staggering, and the cost is also not tiered in such a way that pays attention to industry. Like, for example, a restaurant, particularly if they're a multi-unit restaurant, let's say the Bistro group. They have Bistro, they have Bronx Ale House, and they have Bricks and Hops. Collectively, they probably employ about 55 people. 55 people multiplied by roughly, what is that? If you're paying everyone minimum wage, which people pay above minimum wage, but if you minimum wage is your baseline, that's roughly a cost of $1,200 per person. You have to double it because you have to have another person take their place. So it's $2,400 per person per year. You multiply that $2,400 by 50 employees for a small business like a restaurant, which is maybe only making an 8% rate of return on their investment, that's going to close them. Right. And it's either going to lead to fewer restaurants, which we as a borough want to see more. It's going to lead to fewer employees hired. Vacancy. It's going to lead to vacancy. It's going to lead to fewer people being employed or fewer hours being offered, which means restaurants will close earlier, which means we have dark commercial districts, an uptick in crime, an uptick in refuse on the ground, health indicators, all these other things are thrown off. And our thing with city government is we want to support that, but you, city government, have to come in either with an advanced tax credit or an incentive for these small businesses to pay for it. And you can't pay for it by raising property taxes because property taxes are almost always passed through to the small business anyway. You have to do this within your own coffers. And if the city council and the mayor can vote for their own raises, they need to dig into their pockets. They need to dig into agency budgets and find this money.
Right.
So you're working together around advocacy issues, which we have to take a quick break, but I want to come back and talk about business advocacy, and also to talk about changes that you see coming in the Bronx and challenges. Hi, we're back with Michael Brady from the Third Avenue Bid and Lisa Sorin from the Chamber of Commerce. So now we're going to talk a little bit about advocacy and how you work as an advocate. We've talked a little bit around that, but how you work as advocates for businesses in the Bronx.
I think the advocacy begins with having a relationship with the elected officials that we put in office. Let's start there, right? Because I think that they have the best interest of their constituents. And in that mindset, sometimes I think that they don't look at the bigger picture outside their own corridors. And so I think advocacy begins with having a sit down with the elected officials, letting them know the issues and be the voice for the businesses who then we can turn around and speak to. I mean, all these bills that are being introduced, some elected officials don't understand the bigger impact, right? They're just seeing what the impact may be there. So it starts with a conversation. Sometimes I like to say a courageous conversation or an uncomfortable one, but that's our job, right? We're not looking to make enemies. We may make some along the way, but it's in the best interest, right? The well-intended, we understand the economic development of our borough with everybody else, right? I don't consider myself an expert. I consider myself surrounded by the right people that as collaboratively, we're the experts. So to me, it begins with that conversation. What would you say?
I would say the elected officials are a huge part of this, right? And I think oftentimes, particularly in the current political climate, those folks who are elected get swept up in politically unrealistic legislation. It sounds
Well
really
said.
good, it fills the soundbite, and will and could it deliver for the residents? Absolutely. But there are a lot of unintended consequences that are associated with that will bankrupt the very fabric of our communities. So I think that in tandem with working with our elected officials, it's really about organizing our small businesses. And this is a very clear message to our small businesses. There is an entire industry, a nonprofit sector, that is founded on organizing and advocacy. And they are paid organizers, they're paid advocates, they can show up in the hundreds at City Hall. Unfortunately, small businesses, we have businesses to run. No one's paying us to hold a picket sign, but we need to start. There are 200,000 small businesses in New York City. Roughly 96,000 of those small businesses employ less than 50 people.
It's big.
Those are the folks that
Right.
need to turn out and cram City Hall. About a month ago, or maybe just over a month ago, there was a rally that Councilmember Jonai and the Chambers and a bunch of Bronx small business industry groups hosted at City Hall, and we need to do more of that because there are a lot of advocates and organizations who are getting paid to do that are doing it with the guise of, oh, we're protecting small businesses, but they're also not folks who have a small business background. You can't just learn about small businesses in a policy think tank or at Georgetown or NYU, or Baruch. You have to actually be in it. You have to understand, I have to meet payroll, I have to pay my rent, I've got to pay my Con Ed, I've got to pay vendors, all these other things. And what is the city of New York doing to help me? We have a homeless epidemic that is not going away. We have an overdose crisis that is plaguing our borough. We have, quality of life laws that are being overlooked, that are crippling commercial districts because no one wants to walk by people who are panhandling.
Or urinating.
Or urinating, or defecating, or any of those other things. And I think the real question here in the advocacy lens is, what are we small businesses doing to be upset? How are we communicating that? And what is the city of New York, what are they really supposed to do? The city of New York, they're not property managers because they can't manage NYCHA. I don't think they're business managers either because they can't manage business.
So that becomes it's again it's a domino effect that one thing affects. And we're running out of time, but I just want to ask one last question for a couple of sentences. Where do you see the Bronx in 5 years?
Wow, I see it hitting probably an economic development portfolio like we've never seen before. And I think that over the course of those, the Bronx has always been a jewel. I think it's just being, it's being shined
up.
Exactly. And I think that the only way we're going to keep it that way and make sure that the residents and the businesses of the Bronx are the beneficiaries is ruffling a few feathers and educating and involving ourselves in what will be a very challenging campaign season coming up very shortly. And I see our businesses joining forces.
Yeah, I think the Bronx over the next 5 years will be full of opportunity, and there'll be opportunities for the community. I think we have a real chance right now to learn from our other borough counterparts, Queens, Brooklyn, Staten Island, of how our historically disenfranchised, low-income communities of colors can buy back the block and how we can build wealth in our communities. I think that we are putting a framework in play right now by doing pilot programs such as retail condo acquisitions and things like that actually get our community to take their power. I think it's a misnomer that people say, oh, I'm empowering. Empowering means something's being given. Power is never given, it's always taken. And I think that we're, over the next 5 years or so, the Bronx is taking back its power.
And maybe you and I can be running the Bronx. What do you think?
Not with an elected title, but
Right. We stay on our side of the track.
Double top secret.
Yeah.
Thank you both so much, and I really have to say, the Bronx is so lucky to have the two of you, and so I do hope you stay with us.
Thank you for this.
Yeah, this is wonderful. Thank you for letting us tell our
It's been fun to talk
story.
to you both, so
Thank you.
thanks. That's all we have time for today. Hope you've enjoyed this visit, and if you want to watch the show again or have missed a part of it, just go to BronxNet.tv and click on Mission BX. See you again when we visit more wonderful nonprofits in the Bronx.